If you have a question, just drop it into the chat, please. If you want to ask a question. Start with Jody.
Good. Hey, Jody Dillon with Cardinal Authority. Can you just kind of go through the emotions for you and your team in the last 24 hours and kind of what you thought about the process going into last night's selection show and then when you didn't get picked, what it was like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was incredibly difficult. You know, it was not the news that we wanted to hear. You know, Jody, we had gathered the team a little differently this year because of COVID. It was simply the team. We were in the practice facility. You know, we were spaced out. We had dinner for the guys, and you know, it was a tough show to watch, and it's tough to be a part of. You know, it's not certainly you know, something that we were, I don't want to say prepared for, but you know, it was difficult. And you know, as certain teams that you know had been mentioned about being bubble teams and below us, maybe you know slightly above us, as they were going off the board, you know, it gave you a sickening feeling. And you know, as much as the players were aware, I think the coaches were even more keenly aware, just you know, being in it and having an eye on all those things that affect you. So yeah, it was a tough moment. You know, I don't think I've ever been a part of a room where we didn't get in the 24 years I've been a coach or a player.
Go to Michael and then CD.
Hey, Coach. Michael McCammon from Cardinal Authority. Obviously, you know, you're quite aware of the you know, the expectations of the program. How, on that note, how difficult is it knowing how disappointed, you know, the fans are and that type of stuff of not seeing the program, you know, reach to the levels that the hopes are for there? Yeah,
I mean, it's incredibly disappointing. You know, it's everything that you work for in the off season. It's everything that you prepare for to be a part of March Madness. But, you know, it didn't happen. You know, it wasn't reality. And I think that, you know, we came here as a coaching staff to be a part of the big tournament. And so, you know, I'd tell you that there were a lot of things that go into play. You know, we were, had we been selected, we would have been the youngest, most inexperienced team out of the 68 teams. We would have been. You know, we replaced all 5 starters off of last year's top 15 team, all 5. And, you know, it's not just as simple as pressing a button and saying, you know, we want to be a tournament team again. You have to earn it and you have to work for it. And with an incredibly young team and not a true off season, you know, the inability to work with our players in the off season, the 2 COVID pauses that our team experienced, Malik Williams, one of the best defensive players and the voice of our team, goes down for basically the entire year. Grad transfer that we were expecting to play a significant role in, Charles Minlin, got hurt and never was quite the same. And so, you know, all those things equate to us sitting here not being a part of March Madness. But, you know, I think that, you know, we know what we need to do and where we're going. But at the same time, yesterday was very, very difficult. So, you know, when we took over here 3 years ago, it was a mess. It was a mess. We knew there would be some tough days, and yesterday was maybe the toughest we've had. And, you know, but we understood the challenge, and it still is a challenge. And as I said, when you lose 5 starters off last year's top 15 team with a bunch of guys that are inexperienced, and then you lose a couple key experienced players, you're not just going to roll into the NCAA tournament, you know, like things have been in the past at times. That's just reality. And, you know, our staff is committed to make sure, you know, we get back to where this program is used to being.
CD.
Coach, CD Cap and Card Chronicle, I'll try to sneak in a couple of things. One is, given that you're the first at-large replacement, specifically, what does that mean between for you all between now and the deadline for that sometime tomorrow. I don't fully understand that. And secondly, have you had a chance to reflect, given all the vagaries of the situation in which you've just described, some things that you and your staff might have done differently, given all that might have come out with a better outcome?
Yeah, CD, I would tell you, as far as being a replacement team, I think that's nice language that the NCAA put out. It's a great safeguard for them in the tournament. But the reality of it is, I don't see any team missing the NCAA tournament, at least once it begins. Now, once it begins, that could be a different story. But let's face it, if you can still have 5 players, not even have to have a coach on the sideline, most rosters with walk-ons and scholarship players, are 16 or 17 players. And so I just have a hard time believing in the next, 28 hours or so that an entire roster is going to be decimated to the point where they can't play. So I don't even think that's a consideration. Things to do differently. Hindsight, as you know, is always 20/20. We made a lot of choices going into the season, believing Malik was going to be a significant part of our team. And, those aren't just captain choices and experience, but that's X's and O's and whatnot. And that didn't happen. We lost an all-conference defensive player in Malik. We lost the voice of our team. And when we lose him and when we lost him, we had a very, very different front court. We had 3 freshmen basically, trying to man the 5 position. So that was very, very tough to handle. It's something that we couldn't have predicted with all the injuries. We couldn't have predicted 2 COVID pauses, and a young team like ours, we needed to be in practice every single day. I mean, you saw the results when we came out of COVID. We were too young and inexperienced to get through it the way that we wanted to. Having said that, we followed every possible COVID guideline. When we traveled to Syracuse, we were a whole team. No negative or no positive tests. And we landed in the test that basically confirmed our Georgia Tech game from the night before, which was different from the COVID test that you take in preparation to play somebody, the Syracuse game. That was actually the day before. We were testing dang near every day. There's a positive. There's one positive on our team. Now, we're traveling together. As much as you want to distance from one another, as much as you want to follow everything that you do, we're going to practice. We're in a bus together. We're in an elevator together. It's just, and it took out multiple players. It took out the head coach, which some might say that was a good thing. But, when I'm at home for 16 straight days and can't go to practice and, can't be on the floor with, again, one of the youngest teams in the country, that's hard to make up when you're in, February, late January, February. The continuity that some of the other teams have had is just difficult. So hindsight's always 20/20. If you had told me before the year, hey, you're not going to have Malik, we probably would have done some things differently. But is what it is, and we got to learn from it. We got to get better in the course of this hopefully normal off season.
Go to Shannon.
Yeah, I have a quick 2-parter. With a young team, what went into the process of not playing an NIT, just knowing that you would have been a top seed? And there are reports that Aiden is transferring. Is that accurate?
Aiden is transferring. He put his name, I believe, in the portal later this morning or early this afternoon. It's been a tough road for Aiden. I know he had massive expectations coming in, but he wasn't ready for college basketball at any level when he first came in, through no fault of his own. And then throughout his 2 years, he's just been injured almost consistently. When I talked to him this morning, I feel bad for him because, again, a little bit like our team this year, if you can't be on the practice floor each and every day, how do you get better? It's not just about talking about it. And I don't know if there ever been 2-3 weeks in a row where Aiden was able to practice, and it was just one tough thing after another. Some some minor, and some a little bit more major. And so it's just sort of what he's had to deal with for his 2 years. And I think him getting a fresh start at a new place hopefully sort of turns the tide in terms of injury and being able to be a consistent player. Shannon, as far as the NIT, I mean, it's a class tournament. It is. It certainly isn't what we work towards or what our goal is. But, that decision was probably made a week or two ago, between myself and Vince. And, we were really on the same page. The health of our team this year just wasn't very good, even down the stretch. I mean, we had days where we were practicing with 7 and 8 players. And when you go on 2 COVID pauses, you're losing your captain, you have guys that are injured. It wasn't the right decision for this team to play in the NIT. It's been a long and challenging season for a lot of reasons. And it didn't have anything to do with the disappointment of last night not playing in the NIT. It's a great tournament. It's a class tournament. Maybe we would have felt a little bit differently had we been able to play in front of our fans and play in the Yum. But to go to Dallas, sit in hotel rooms, spaced apart with 7 and 8 healthy players, it just wasn't for this group.
Go to Ken Spencer and then Ken Taylor.
Yeah, Chris, you mentioned a few minutes ago that you guys know what you need to do moving forward. What is that?
We need to have a great offseason in front of us, Ken. One that we needed last summer, to be quite honest. When you welcome 3 new freshmen, two grad transfers, and you're bringing back sophomores that didn't play a year ago, that virtually practiced and played mop-up minutes. We needed an offseason, both in the weight room and on the court, to develop our players so that we could be a better team. And that's what this team needs. We need to add a few pieces, and we're going to continue to do that as time rolls on. But the biggest thing is we need a really good offseason.
Ken?
Chris, you mentioned how the coaches kind of knew as the bracket was being unveiled. I'm sure when you saw Michigan State in a play-in game, you see Syracuse get in as an 11. But when it gets down to that last little bracket and there's a 10 seed left out there, at that point, you're still holding out hope. I imagine that's going to be you. Take me through what that feeling is like, that gut punch, and how does it compare to last year having the entire tournament pulled from you?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's what you work for, and it's what you want for your players. And, to see those guys, have to sit there and watch team after team after team scroll by. I think by the time the end of the bracket was showing, I knew we weren't going to be a part of it. There's too many teams that were projected a little bit below us in some brackets that were already being included, and there just wasn't much space left. So by the time the bracket had a few teams left, I didn't hold out much hope. It's a tough job that the committee has. I mean, it's a tough job. You're not talking about major discrepancies between the last few teams that get in the tournament. It's paper thin. It's what do you value? Do you value in a year like this a team that's played more games? Or do you value, great wins or that bad loss? What do you value? People say the eye test, or, who do they beat? But at the end of the day, it's still a paper thin margin. And you can argue on both sides of it. Had we been included, I think there'd be another team that said, why aren't we included? So, it's tough. I think that there are a lot of things that sort of went into it. We played, more road games in the ACC than we played home games. Did they take into account the fact that, Carleek didn't play and Jalen played 10 minutes before he couldn't breathe anymore at Wisconsin, and we made the choice to play that game coming off of COVID. So, there's a lot of things. And I don't think there was one thing that necessarily pushed us out, could have got us in. Obviously, we could have won more games, and that would have done the trick. But it is what it is, and I don't fault the committee one bit. We put ourselves in that position.
Go to Michael and then Fred.
Hey, Chris, we've talked about, I guess, guys not seeming up from the start of the game or coming out of the halftime a couple times this season. Could that correlate to potentially pace of play? And are those two things that I guess will be addressed, or how do you address those kind of things during the offseason?
Well, the lack of urgency that you guys like to point to, we never played or prepared like we were a shoe-in for the tournament. Maybe that's how it appeared on TV, but we never thought that. When you say lack of urgency, I say we've got a young team, 331st in the nation in experience, 331st. We took our most experienced team, a top 15 team a year ago, and we lost all 5 starters. And again, no off season. We're asking these guys to be urgent every second. It's a very tough transition from high school to college, from never having played meaningful minutes to now being counted on for 30 minutes. And it was frustrating. And it's frustrating as heck. But, that lesson hopefully got learned last night when we watched the selection show play out. Listen, the pace of play, we want to play faster. We're not going to be Rick Pitino and pressing all over the place, but we want to play full court and we want to push the ball. We had 2 guards that played dang near 40 minutes a game in David and Carlik. 40. Josh Nickelberry was hurt almost more than half the season, as was Charles Minland. Those are our other 2 backup guards. So I'm going to ask those guys for 40 minutes each. Hey, we want you to pick up full court, turn the ball handler. We want you guys to push the pace. Any defensive, rebound that we get or made shot, we want to push the pace like our hair's on fire. We want you to guard the best guards in the country. We want you to stay out of foul trouble. And by the way, beat our 2 leading scorers. Their wheels are going to fall off. So we recognize that we were a better team when we played faster. We recognize that. And we made efforts to try and play faster. But again, we had conditioning issues and we had injury issues where 2 of our fastest guys played 40 minutes a game. And so, you couple that, we had 12 scholarship players, 3 of which were out almost the entire year. We're still limited on scholarships that we're allowed to have. And hopefully that goes away after this season, but is what it is. And so to answer your question, yes, we felt the lack of urgency as a coaching staff. We want to play faster. Yes, we want to play faster. Saying it and being able to do it.
To Fred.
Coach, you've touched on the future a little bit. Do you know, or what do you think your situation is with Malik as well as Carly? Their unique situations. Maybe they'd want to come back, but also looking at the future, some would argue that your 3-point shooting might be a place to improve on. Your thoughts about that and where you might be able to go with that?
Coach is muted.
We've not been able to hear Chris in this answer at all.
Yeah, where did I get cut off at?
Sorry, right at the very beginning. Just some thoughts about Malik. Obviously, unique situation with the injury as well as Carly, and also a 3-point shooting issue sort of looms out there as maybe a place you might be able to improve on.
Yeah, we need to improve the 3-point shooting. There's no question. I would tell you that one day after the selection show, I haven't had an opportunity to really sit down with Malik and Carlik. That's not something that's going to be hashed out in a day. Love to have both of those guys back, as you know. They're terrific players. They're great representatives of the university. But, we've also, and they also have to look out for their future. And I want whatever is best for them. And whether that's being in a Louisville uniform or that's, moving forward professionally, we're going to be very supportive of that. But I don't really have an answer right now as to what those guys are going to do.
Go to Eric and then Adam Zagoria.
Chris, there's been no playbook for a while really on handling some of these situations that you have found yourself in. And now you've got a group of young guys, and some who made great strides like Jalen and Samuel, who last year the tournament taken away, this year get to go. I mean, how do you kind of overcome that? The fact that they're missing out on this tournament experience, they're going to be your experienced leaders here coming up. And, how do you just kind of as a coach shift your own playbook, how you deal with stuff nobody's ever really encountered?
Yeah, I think it's a tough pill to swallow for those guys. We would have certainly been a part of it a year ago. We aren't a part of it this year. And, they quite simply came here, Eric, to play for those type of expectations. And I think failure is the greatest teacher and the greatest motivator. And I would like to think that how we felt last night, sitting in front of that video screen, will do wonders for our motivation and our understanding that every little thing that we do as a player, as coaches, matters. Everything, and so they're going to have to take that. They're going to have to take that tough experience they had last night, and they've got to let it motivate them and fuel them and push them to be leaders of our program so that it doesn't happen again. So we're not in the same position again. And, guys are going to have to get a lot more mature and a lot more grown up and soak in details a hell of a lot better than we did this year so that it doesn't happen again. But I think we have some guys that made some strides this year, like you said, but I don't think those strides were long enough to put us in a position where we're in the tournament this year, and that bared itself out. So we push towards next year, and hopefully with a great off season and a few additions, and then failure being a really good teacher, we'll be in a much different position a year from now.
Go to Adam.
Hey, Chris, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, I'm sorry, Chris, I missed the beginning call. Just what is your approach and attitude going into this week? I mean, do you think there's a chance your team will? Do you see yourselves kind of like in a play? If the main person gets sick, you'll be able to go in, or how are you approaching it?
Yeah, I mean, we'll be ready. I think that the prerequisite is that you have all those negative tests in a row. So we'll be ready. I don't see that happening. By tomorrow night, there has to be a team that doesn't have 5 players able to play. And so I don't see that happening.
There's a Seinfeld once where Jerry and George take out Bette Midler, so Jerry's girlfriend, who's the understudy in a play, can be in the play. Do you relate to that at all? Do you feel like Jerry Seinfeld at all this week?
That's a hell of an analogy, Adam. But no, no one's wishing for anybody to get COVID. We're not like on hands and knees here praying for an outbreak. Like that's just not us. So I hope every team that got selected is able to play in the tournament and have a great experience. And as I talked about, the tournament committee has a tough job, and we're not a part of it. And I don't see that changing.
Go to Matt.
Thanks, and good luck.
Thank you.
Hey, Coach. Matt McGavick with Sports Illustrated. You said that earlier you guys need to have a really good offseason. Do you predict that any more roster or even coaching staff shakeup could be a part of that?
Yeah, Matt. I mean, I think there's certainly going to be changes. I think it's too close to the tough news that we got last night. Still trying to digest that. But some decisions are going to happen sooner than others. We talked about Aiden. College basketball is always about change, And I think this offseason will reflect that.
Tim?
Yeah, Chris, you alluded earlier to the mess you inherited, and 3 years later, the NCAA case is still not resolved.
Really?
Given the IARP pace, there's no telling how long that's going to hover. Can you give us a sense for how much that has impacted your program, your ability to recruit? Are there players who just don't want to touch Louisville because of the uncertainty?
I think we have good players, and we're getting good players. But I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a huge factor.
On another topic, do you expect any other players to enter the transfer portal?
I think that in 2021, with the opportunity to play right away looming, I would not be surprised if there weren't some decisions made on our team.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for Coach? I don't see any in the chat, but if you have any, just go ahead and blurt it out.
Coach, you talked about Malik and Carly, but what about Charles Binland? Is he a guy you have a feel on whether he might try to come back and play one more year?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really tough experience for Charles. He came here having scored almost 1,500 points in college, and the injury really hurt him and really set him back more than just the 6 weeks that it was forecasted. I don't see Charles making the decision to come back. I think it's been a tough experience. I think he's done a terrific job of endearing himself to teammates. He was never a guy that was a malcontent. He was always for the team. I love that about him. But I think it was a tough playing experience, which I can relate to. I went through that my last year in college. But I don't anticipate him being back next year, Shannon.
Chris, how will you handle the NBA process with David, and what would it take for you to advise him to go ahead and take that next step?
Well, the thing with David is I have a longer relationship with him. Obviously I didn't recruit Jordan Wara when he first came in here, but I built up a lot of trust with he and his family, and he made the decision to enter his name and ultimately pulled it out, and then had a really good junior year and got his degree, and got a guaranteed contract with the Bucks. So I say this about every player that has that opportunity. I want what's best for David Johnson. I don't know what that is yet. I don't think he knows what that is yet, because that process really gets crystallized when you put your name in and you get feedback from the entity that ultimately selects you. You can hear message board fodder or draft board fodder or, people in the know, but the NBA gives you all the real feedback that you need to know. And we see it play it out all the time. Some kids make decisions and you're like, why would he go? And then the next thing you know, he's like a top 15 pick. And then you see the opposite is true, where you say, why would that guy go and he doesn't get drafted? And so David's going to learn all about that, with his family and the agent that sort of helps him through that process legally over the next couple months. And I'll have a sit down and I'll be as involved with any of my players as they want or as uninvolved. I just want to be a supporter, and I'll give him my 2 cents. But, he may throw that 2 cents on the ground, or he may listen to it. It's everybody's got to do what they feel like is in their best interest for their career. And I'll always be incredibly supportive of that.
Hey, Coach, Matt McGavick again. Kind of building off the end of that last question, you talked about David and his possibilities of going to the NBA draft. Do you foresee Carlik Jones doing the same? He across a lot of NBA boards out there, he's not as highly. Do you think he's going to try and attempt the same path as DJ?
I think he should. I know if it was my son, I'd try to get as much feedback as I could and not make that decision on March 15th. But when I have to make that decision, the good thing for our program, at least with Carlik, is that he comes back, he's in essence a free scholarship. I mean, maybe Vince doesn't feel like that with the budget, but he doesn't count against our scholarship count of 13 for next year. But again, I think it's always wise, if you're being mentioned, if there's a legitimate chance for you to play at that next level, to get as much possible feedback and to give it the best shot you can, and then make the decision based on the feedback you get. And so I would, that's what my take would be for both of those guys.
Chris, Tim Sullivan again. Just with the uncertainty regarding the deadline tomorrow, are you practicing today and tomorrow?
We are not. So our guys are getting in the gym, Tim, on their own. But you know, it's tough to ask those guys to come in and on the disappointment of last night and say, hey, let's go out there and practice our butt off. So no, we are not.
Thanks.
Chris, one of the things that comes with your job is all these wonderful critics, some of whom are on this Zoom call and many who are calling radio or whatever. How much are you your own critic too? I mean, how much do you second guess yourself? Do you not need to when you got so many people out there doing it for you after a tough experience? And I mean the whole year like this and all the things you dealt with. How do you deal with this, from your own standpoint?
Yeah, I think having as much humility as you can to try to figure out, what do I need to do better? Where do I need to grow as a coach? How can I put the best coaching staff forward, that works together to help our team improve? I mean, I ask those questions in the off season, every year, Eric, and they probably have to be a lot more critical questions this year. I read an article that was really interesting about Matt Painter this morning on The Athletic, and he talked about he had that time where he sort of went in a cave and reflected, on why the program wasn't maybe what he had envisioned. And so, last night was really, really tough for a lot of people, but no tougher than the guy that you're looking at, whether people believe that or not. I've been to 20 NCAA tournaments out of the 24 times I could have. I'm not used to being in a position where we don't make it. The one time that we did not make it at Xavier, we kicked off our best player and then the other one got thrown out of school, and those were two first-team all-conference type players. And we took a step backwards to take a step forward. And, this was the, obviously in my mind, the first year that, our record just wasn't good enough to be in the NCAA tournament for, again, a lot of reasons. But, yeah, I'm going to have and still have and do throughout the year. This isn't like an end of the season vision that I have all of a sudden. You're constantly trying to figure out ways to improve your team. But now I can do that without the crux of preparing for the next opponent, without worrying about what we're going to do at practice today. And I think it's going to be good for our program.
Anything further for Coach?
Hey, Coach. You talked about the transfer market. Do you feel like you have a good idea right now of, who might be back next season, and specifically how many spots you might have available to fill a need entering next season?
I 24 hours ago, I was preparing Monday's practice. I wasn't preparing end of the season meetings with our players. So it's way too early. I think it's been with Aiden probably building. He hasn't been able to practice for the last month and a half or playing games. And so that's why I think that decision was made so quick, at least quick in your guys' minds. But no, again, I was preparing for today's practice, not end of the season meetings, and those will happen over the next 7 to 10 days, and we'll sort of see what change comes about.
Chris,
go ahead.
Chris, is there an urgency because there's going to be so many kids in the transfer portal and so many other teams with the opportunity to revamp their rosters for you guys to feel like you've really got to get involved in that pretty quickly?
Well, I mean, there's always an urgency, Jeff. I think that, you know, we want to be quick, but we don't want to be in a hurry. We don't want to make wrong decisions either. So it's a little bit of both. You know, we've got to make sure that, you know, we're getting who we need to help us have the best team for next year. And, you know, there's a balancing act there. I'd be lying if there wasn't. You know, there's kids that are going into the portal each and every day. Some of them you have former relationships with because you recruited them at one point, and some of them you've never heard of. And so we have to find the guys that can really help this team do the things that we want to do.
All right, I paused a little longer that time. Anything further?
Don't use the word pause anymore, Ken.
Yes, sir. All right, Coach, thank you. Thanks for everybody for joining us today.